Hey, everybody. Josh here, the hippie mystic, or whatever you want to call me. For time, I'm Josh, the hippie mystic, Josh Schwartzbach, and I'm the channel for SOTU and have been doing this for over 30 years. And the thing is that we've always put SOTU in the forefront of this whole dynamic. And I've pretty much kept myself in the background because, as I said a little earlier, if you get the first part of this, I am somewhat of an imperfect vessel, as I've attempted to have as much fun in my life as possible. So, Amy has volunteered or what shall we say, sacrificed herself in this circumstance of trying to interview me and trying to figure out who the heck I am. And as I said, I have an interesting background. I'll start it off with saying I was born in 1947 and I came into the world butt first. So, Amy, I'll turn it over to you and we'll go from there, okay?
All right, so that's actually very telling. I might mute on and off because I've been hearing the trains pretty loud, so hopefully people won't be hearing that so much on their end. But it's funny that you started out with that fact, but I did want to ask you, Josh, because I feel like I understand you want to put the emphasis on SOTU, and I completely understand that. But I also wonder if people that watch you and listen to SOTU and the people who might be watching from my end who are interested in channeling and spirituality might want to know more about how you sort of came to this. And I wondered, can you tell me a little bit about maybe even, let's start at the beginning and tell me a little bit about your earliest experiences where you realized there was sort of something more out there, things that maybe might have prompted you to go in this direction with metaphysical concerns and sort of thinking like this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as I said, I was born in 1947, which basically meant that modern medicine didn't really exist. And so I was a breech birth. And because I was a breech birth, people understand that I came in to the world ass first. And, and my head, after coming through the birth canal, was all misshapen. Now, you notice it's not misshapen now because my mother spent the first 6 months of my life rubbing my head. And so I do believe that it was that amount of stimulation that my brain, that my head was getting from that dynamic that possibly was a beginning of this. Now, I had absolutely, up until I was in my 40s, I had no clue that this was the path that I was taking. Um, Everything that I read now I was a voracious reader. So everything that I read seemed to lead me in this direction, including that I would, as an early adolescent, as 10, 11, 12 years old, I'd be reading Heinlein and Asimov and people like that and loving the adventure of the whole idea of extraterrestrials and science fiction and the future. And so I was that's where it was, and it was an adolescent, it was a very childlike search. Um, Long about, and we can go back and touch pieces that you might think that I've missed if you want, but I have to go back to 63, 64 was a very integral time. I was probably 15, 16. I was whatever that adds up to. um,
Adrienne now.
right. But I found the Seth material. Jane Roberts was probably our first modern channel. Not that there haven't been mystics, not that there haven't been mediums or anything else, but I would say that Seth gave us the first real comprehensive information on how it all worked, how reality creation worked, what our position, our physical, emotional, spiritual positions were within that set. And I was fascinated by it. The Seth material is something that, in the beginning, if you're new to this type of work, if you're new to this type of thought, what winds up happening is that you read a paragraph or two and then you have to sit with it for a couple of days in order for you to really grok it. So, and grok's a term that's from Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land. So we'll even get into, if I seem
That's a great
obscure,
term. That's a great term.
if I seem obscure, it's because I'm old. So, so the important part of that dynamic was that really got me curious. And, I was 13, 14, 15 years old. So I really wasn't, I was interested in that as an aside, but mostly I was interested in girls. So, that dynamic, one didn't go with the other very well. So I kind of left it as an aside until and because I felt, even then, I felt that I was on a journey, I was on a path. And even though the path was very unserious, is that a word? um, uh, Even though it was all purposeful, I don't think that anything has happened to me or anything that has occurred in my life that has been outside of my soul's path. And it's not like I haven't had choices. It's not like I haven't made bad choices. I've made as many bad choices as anyone. But I have gained, with each experience that I've had, been able to gain a certain amount of wisdom, hopefully. That's up to everybody else to decide. I can't, it's really hard to assess one's own levels of wisdom. Do you want a word in? Because I can keep going.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know you can. I know you can. So, so let's go back to, all right. So it sounds like it was around the time of like puberty that you sort of started to really get more interested in this stuff. And I think that's actually really common, but do you not feel that there's a connection there for a lot of people? I mean, this is talking about more than you, but I'm curious about that now.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. It's at that time. It's that time. It's that time in life when one questions one's boundaries, when one questions one's reality. The unfortunate part is that that sense of adventure, that sense of exploration, is lost to a lot of people because they hit pieces of themselves or they hit pieces of their world that really scare them. And it is through that dynamic of fear that most people back off from it. But as you well know, and as I'm here to tell you, the more you get into it, the more empowered you become, the more secrets you learn, the more you realize that the first things you have learned were really just the basics. And that the more that you progress, the more that layer upon layer, piece upon piece is added to it. And so one day you wake up and you say, oh my God, this all makes sense. And even this chaos of the world right now makes sense. It's very understandable if you realize that each of us are on a journey that we chose. We chose it. A lot of people like to say, oh, well, I was supposed to be a this and I was supposed. No, you're supposed to be exactly who you are. Even if you feel less than, it should be a dynamic that you are able to build up not the dynamic of less than, but you utilize those dynamics to become stronger, because these are the issues that you chose to give yourself previously to incarnating. This is our belief, previous to incarnating into this lifetime. Now you can take, you don't have to follow a straight path down your soul's path. And as a matter of fact, most people don't. They do what we take. They'll hit something that they have put into their path, and they'll take a long, circuitous route around the outside of it in order to avoid dealing with it. But I found out that if you deal with it and you deal with it right up front, it's easier, it's quicker, and you gain the empowerment that you chose to gain by giving yourself that crossroads in life. So everything in your life, dear ones, is purposeful. Everything is meaningful. There are no, from our perspective, there are no coincidences.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yeah, so you were talking about the Seth books, and I'm always really interested in what people's influences were, because a lot of people that I know that get into spirituality and metaphysical, the occult, whatever, they come in through, either something they've read or something they've listened to or art, in some way. You were talking about the Seth books, but do you have are there any other books or is there other influences that you feel were really formative for you? That's always really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I don't
So I want
like
to hear what you think.
I don't like to recommend any particular book to anyone, because you're going to find your own path. You're going to find the thing that interests
Sure, no,
you.
I'm saying recommend.
So,
Right, I'm not saying recommend, but I'm just saying for you personally, what was meaningful along your path?
well, I would try to get there were no other channels back in those days, so I read a lot of the old theosophical stuff, Madame Blavatsky, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the turn of the century stuff that was happening back then, because that was the rise of spirituality, the last rise in spirituality around the world. Was in the 1890s, late 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s. And for that 20 to 30-year period there was a lot of information given. So I was into Rosicrucians for a while. I was into I was even into some of the darker stuff for a while, because in fact the truth of the matter is there's that you need both. In order to be really powerful in
Mm-hmm.
your
Wait,
reality, you need to be both.
that garbled a little bit.
Was garbled.
Can you go back just a little bit? It kind of got garbled. So I felt like that was important.
Yeah, it is a dynamic that you
Um,
need both the dark and the light in your lives if you are going to be truly powerful. If you are strictly what we would call a light shadow person, then you're constantly being abused because you're naive, because you're looking for, instead of looking at reality, you're putting best case scenarios, in fact, when in fact, dark shadow is really nothing but experience. And when you claim and you own the dynamics of your own experiences, you are able to create almost anything you would wish. Almost anything you would wish.
I love that.
So,
Yeah, I
and
love
again,
that. I love.
we're putting this information out for a lot of reasons, but primarily, and remind me of that at the end of this, because I want to save it for the end, because I kind of got a download this morning that kind of surprised
Okay.
me, but we might as well let it out here. Why not? But not to hang out a carrot for you all, but stay till the end and I'll let you have it.
Sure, sure. That sounds good. That sounds good. All right, we'll get a little sneak peek in. So, so you came through channeling, like through reading the sex books, but were you always interested in that specifically?
No.
Or how did you get, no, okay.
Okay.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so I blame it on her. Not Amy. I'm not pointing at Amy.
Adrian.
Adrian is sitting next
She's
to
an
me.
angel.
Okay, so Adrian is my partner.
Stop, she's an angel.
Well, to you perhaps. But I love her deeply and dearly. I love her more than I love myself. So that's something to say. But so here we have a situation where I was about 40 years old, 41, and I had really got tired of playing around. You know, I was one of those guys. Sorry, you couldn't catch me. I'd play with you for a while, but you know, I wasn't really serious about getting involved in the dynamic of relationships with anybody because I felt that, well, back in those days, the image I had of myself was a poverty-stricken holy man walking down the road, gaining alms from everyone and giving out wisdom for free, you know. And that's kind of the image that I had for that kind of future. So I wasn't really, and I had seen so many relationships cause crashing and burning, and people, they start out all happy and gay, and then after a while they wind up crashed and burned and devastated and all of that, and they have to go through. So I was able to, not that I didn't have any relationships, but I didn't have very many compared to, well, I had a lot, but you wouldn't really call them relationships. But I had a lot of friendships. There you go. I had a lot of very close friendships with people. So, but I also was interested. I had a situation in the 80s around the time of Ronnie Reagan I lived in Washington, D.C. And I had a situation where I actually crashed and burned. I moved up to Albany, New York area, where you are right now. Got a job. It was a good job, but it was, you know, I've always been a pretty blue collar guy. I don't have have a high school education. I don't have any college, and everything that I have learned, that's why, you know, Adrian's been saying lately, oh, well, he's the Streetwise channel. Well, okay, yeah, I'm Streetwise because I was poor back in those days, and you know, you know, you had to learn how to be streetwise. Now, there's more to this, and there's a couple of different layers, but we'll be here all afternoon if I get into all of them. But let's just say that Adrian and I met at a class where there was another woman that was a channel. It was local here in the New York, Massachusetts area. And she was a great teacher for us in that sort of way. And we were both her students in a way. And Adrian and I actually didn't really like each other much when we first met. She wore way too much makeup for me. And, you know, well, it was back in the day, you know. I really haven't changed much. I'm still kind of the old hippie.
I bet she was really cute. She's a beautiful woman now.
Oh, you should have seen her with makeup. It was unbearable. It was unbearable. So, but Adrian had been going to this channel called Lazarus, right? And if you folks want to look up Lazarus and Jack Purcell, Purcell, Jack probably made it he was probably the second biggest channel because he actually made it to Merv Griffin. All right, and he was actually really, he was actually, and you can find it. You can find it on YouTube, I believe. The interview between Merv Griffin and Lazarus, the channeled energy. First, he interviewed, like we're doing here. First, he interviewed Jack, and Jack talked about how he all got into it and everything. And then they had Lazarus, and that was on national television back in, it had to be
Wow.
early 70s, and it had to be. So, but we got to know Jack really well, and we went to a number of Lazarus workshops, and in fact, we worked with and for Concept Synergy, which was their group for a while, and it put me into contact with a lot of other people that were interested in this dynamic. And don't ask me how people found out, but Adrian, you see, ever since the time that we had gotten together, Adrian was encouraging me to channel. And it's not anything I really wish to do. I wish to be more in the position of Rob Butch. Rob Butch was Jane Roberts' husband, and Rob would basically transcribe everything that Seth was saying. And so I wanted to be in the position where I was gaining that information, because I was more into bringing that information into the physical, bringing that information into my life in order to be able to see whether it actually worked or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so Adrian was getting me channeling, and I was treating it like a parlor game in the beginning. It's like I was channeling everything and anything. I channeled a tree spirit once. I think the first two energies I brought through were, they call themselves Elenia and Rafferty. And they were dumb. They didn't know doodly. But because I was new, well, it's true. Because I was new and available, they used the opportunity to come through. Then I don't think they ever gave us any information that we could really use other than, things of interest. But it was just enough to keep things going. Well, within a relatively short time, Adrian had me moving from channeling my higher self or channeling Elenia or Rafferty or some other ET or energy. And I felt that there was an energy out there that really, really wanted to come in. And so there was one night that we were sitting in our living room, and I said, well, let's give it a shot. And so the first energy, this was the first permanent energy, semi-permanent energy that came through me, was called Ezekiel. And Ezekiel was with us for what, 7, 8 years?
About 8 years.
And Ezekiel gave us information that really had to do with the templates of how we create our reality through our physical, our emotional, and our spiritual energies. How combining those energies set the template for our soul's journey. And so the first was a dynamic of being able to learn the personal definition of how it worked personally. After 7, 8 years, in came SOTU. Again, I had warning. About a 2 or 3 month warning that there was another energy coming and that, in fact, Ezekiel would be leaving. Now, that caused a lot of consternation around me because there was a...
Well, wait, now, how does that happen? How did the warning come? And that's the detail you just knew.
Yeah, it's not like we have dialogue. It's not like we have dialogue like when you do the interview with SOTU, you'll see that it comes through directly in that sort of way. I lost my track.
That they don't talk to you in your head.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay, right. They talk to me through gestalts. Okay, do you know what a gestalt of energy is? For those of you out there that don't know, it's like a download.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like all of a sudden I will get it, and I'll get it from beginning, middle, and end, and all the stuff that's in between. And my job is to try to put it into words to explain it to you all. Okay, so Adrian wants me to
Great,
go
thanks for
fast.
explaining.
Go ahead, say it again.
I said thanks for explaining that. Yeah, because probably a lot of people don't know what that is.
Yeah. But I would suggest that most people have experienced it. Where all of a sudden you know something, and it's a very normal situation. It's the way spirit talks to you. You know, they speak to you. They don't speak to you because they're not in linear time. They're outside of the dynamic of linear time. So when they speak to you, it's almost like a download. Okay. Oh, let Amy talk.
And what is your practice around that? How do you document those things? Do you just remember everything, or do you document it? Like, how do you keep track of all that information that kind of comes through? How before you were doing it on video like this and in the radio show, what were you doing to keep track of all that?
We were doing live presentations. We were traveling all over the country, and we were doing live presentations for groups of people anywhere from 10 or 15 up to 100, 150, thereabouts. I never really wanted too big a group because they get very unwieldy at a certain time. And yet we would be in the right place at the right time to, like had been scheduled for a session in New York City on the 16th of September, 2001. And we did it, and we did that session. That was an amazing session, right after 9/11, so we've always, not always, we've often been in the right place at the right time or right after a dynamic to be able to do this. But so in the beginning, everything was on audio tape. And I probably have hundreds of audio tapes laying around here somewhere that I would have to sometime digitize in order to get the information off of. After that, we've been using, computer. We've got a lot of stuff on CD-ROM. We've got a lot of stuff on DVD because we've tried to archive pretty much everything. Ooh, what did I lose? Did you do that, Adrian?
Nope. But keep going. Keep talking.
Okay. Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Okay. It scares me if all of a sudden the screen changes. Your turn.
At some point, you're going to have to let Adrienne pop her head in for new people that haven't met her yet, because she's such an important part of this whole thing.
Come on.
Hi, Adrienne.
Hi, folks.
Put your head in. Hi.
The other way. Stand up.
We just have to give you credit because I know how hard you work on the technical side of this.
Well, she's my front man.
Right, cool.
She's my front person. It's not. You have to understand in the past that I have done literally thousands of readings for people, personal, private readings for people, and it got to the point where I had to say, "Well, folks, it's too much. I can't handle it. We can't do it for you. The basic premise of this work has been to empower you, not to empower us. We're already empowered."
I just was saying, I think a lot more people are receptive to it because they're kind of hurting and feeling the foundation cracking, and there's so much confusion. So the places where they were finding answers before are not giving those answers anymore.
Right. Well, that's one of the things that we've been telling people for over a year now. is that the dynamic is going to be such that, and especially people like you, we don't deal with the general public except electronically at this point. And so, people like you that are in direct contact with the public, you're the ones that are going to be making a difference. You're the ones that are going to be taking this type of information to people. You're the ones that are going to be the catalysts that allow for the change. Now, the change is occurring anyway. I've been saying to people for years now, what's it going to take to motivate you? Well, we think this is pretty much motivation enough. Now, who would have thunk it? It's a situation where who would have thought that they were going to bring down the whole system? But it seems that that's what the attempt seems to be being. Now, from our perspective, earthly humanity is a wild card. And so even though there are those that would have our future planned out for us, it's not going to be what they think it's going to be. In fact, we have a future in front of us of peace with enough for all and the ability to move, because we already have the ability. They're trying to distract us in order to keep us from moving into our full empowerment. That's that whole dynamic. Keep you all separate. Keep you all apart. Don't join together in groups. Do not come together because you will poison each other. BS. Everybody needs to go play in the dirt. Build up your immune systems. Go play in the dirt. Hey, and I have some chicken houses to clean out in case anybody wants to play in the dirt. So.
Yep. Well, there's a lot more people gardening right now, and that's what they should be doing. It's true. I've been saying the same thing when I've been making videos. I've been telling people, go put your hands in the dirt, get involved with some physical labor, put your feet on the ground. Everybody's getting very up in their head, so we need to bring it down now. So that's really interesting. Well, we're saying the same thing. That's why I like talking to you, though, because you and SOTU have been saying this kind of all along since I met you, even before this whole thing started, and I just think that's really interesting. I also think you have a lot of different perspectives to offer, which, sometimes we hear things that they feel, they're shocking. They're not what we would normally, they're not how we would normally think. They're not what we are seeing with our filters in place, like in the world around us. So they're uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean they're not worth considering. And even just taking that step can sort of transform your thinking and your perspective. So that's why I like talking with you, because it's challenging at times. And I think people need, they have the challenge out there, but it's hard to know how to think about it in the day-to-day, and getting some different frames of reference is great. So that's why I really appreciate you. So, say something about that, but then I want to get back just for like a minute. I want to talk a little bit more about SOTU, though, and kind of clarify some points. So if you want to finish what your thought was about that message.
Well, the whole dynamic around understanding this is you did good, no problem. And I shut up and I listened to you. So, that's half the battle right there. So here, this is a situation where when I first started the channel, I felt left out. I didn't start out as an unconscious channel. I'm an unconscious channel now. I really, if it's important for me to remember it, I will remember the essence of it. I will remember it through SOTU's point of view. Okay? But I won't remember what was actually... Go ahead.
Say what's the difference between a conscious and an unconscious channel, because I think a lot of people don't understand that.
I'm about to. A conscious channel is one that is present in the moment when the energy is speaking through you. And that's most people that channel, because it really does take a leap of faith to let go that first time, to really allow the energy to come right in, to take over. And so, there's a part of your mind, there's a part of the dynamic, especially in the beginning, where you're really interested in what's being said, in what's going on. And so that's where I was in the beginning of the dynamic of channeling. The problem is that if you feel passionately about something, that's going to come through and that's going to color the information. So I had been in a situation where SOTU was talking to this one guy, and he was being, or it was Ezekiel back then, and Ezekiel was being, the guy was being really resistant, and I'm back there listening, and I'm going, and Ezekiel's ready to just give up on the guy and move on, and I'm back there going, wait a minute, come on, push him a little more, push him a little far. Well, it was a disaster, let us say that. It's like it alienated. There was a nice group, but it alienated the whole group. And so it was after that.
Right.
It was after that I realized that if this was going to work at all, I had to get out of the way. And it was suggested to me that I go unconscious. Now, when I first started, again, it's not any great mystery. It all happens in your imagination. Originally when I was doing it, I would find myself walking into a room. There would be a chair there. There would be a door behind me. I would sit down in the chair. I would hear the door open behind me. Ezekiel would walk through, and they would begin to speak, and they would begin to speak through me in that sort of way. But again, like I said, I was conscious of everything. Well, moving to a place of being unconscious, it really was an exercise that I've not never been able to, but I haven't really worked with anyone enough time that I have been able to teach them to go unconscious. But I've taught dozens of people to channel. But again, it's very few that I have found that's been able to make that leap of faith, let's call it, that just would allow that to happen. But long story. This is a dynamic that is very important to this whole thing, because in order to understand how I gained this measure of wisdom and experience while being unconscious, I set up the parameters that I would always benefit physically, emotionally, and spiritually, that I would always grow physically, emotionally, and spiritually from the act of channeling. At this stage in my life, I would say that I have tens of thousands of hours channeling. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Wow. That's impressive.
And so...
But now when you say you... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, just the last piece of this is that we would do intensives. We would do intensive workshops that would be over a period of 2 weekends, where I would be doing 4 hours on Friday night, 8 hours on Saturday, and 8 hours on Sunday of channeling. And they would be bringing through information that was earth-shaking and so understandable in those sorts, in the ways of interpreting the dynamics of our reality and the reflections of our reality, and what we were able to do, what we could do as individuals in order to be able to change things that we wish to change. So I would have to often spend, if we were doing 2 weekends in a row, I would often have to spend Monday through Friday trying to figure out what I had learned through that whole dynamic of Gestalt, because it all came through the dynamic of Gestalt. So I would be spending a whole week trying to figure out what just happened. Now, Adrienne was a big help in that matter, because she participated in the workshops from from her point of view, and so that really helped in that sort of way. But this has happened because of what I've actually been, the actual act of channeling.
Mm, mm. Yeah, because I was curious about when you said you set up these parameters. I mean, I know for me personally that is a challenge, right? So something will kind of come and then you have to kind of sit with it because sometimes not all the pieces are making, you haven't assimilated it yet. And there's a lot of discomfort and sometimes there's like pain and illness associated with that. So it's smart that you set up that parameter, but how is that enforced? So is that to say, when you say you set up that parameter, is that something that you structured within yourself, or was that something that you made as a condition of whatever you were channeling? Like, if in order to work with you, this is how it had to happen.
Exactly. In order to work for me, it was in order to work for me, this is how it had to happen. And if it wasn't clear enough, the channeling would stop.
Got it. Got it.
In other words, if I wasn't, if I was getting, if I was getting in the way too much, you know, it would stop. And that I think has only happened once or twice. Okay. What? That the channeling has stopped?
Well, you felt that
Adrian,
you felt that you were the problem in that case? You felt that you were the problem in that case, and that's why it had to stop?
Yes.
That it was you. It was your limitation.
Yes. I cared about something. In other words, I wasn't keeping a neutral objective. Right. I wasn't keeping a neutral objective viewpoint about something. It was probably, I know it was back in the beginning. It was people I was emotionally involved with. It was people that I was connected to in various ways. Okay. And I would, you know, like I said, I was channeling for a parlor, like a parlor game. It got really serious really quickly. But we don't have to go into the trauma and drama around that. But there were a number of things that happened along the way that were uncomfortable, to say the least. But, and that's another point, the comfort was never and will never be a prerequisite for this work. If you're comfortable, you're not motivated.
That I think that adherence to a particular idea or an outcome that you were talking about, in my thinking, we would call that lust of results. So you want to be without lust of results, right?
Right.
Because when you have a conception of that and you're projecting all of your stuff onto it, it's not necessarily as direct and pure as if you were sort of giving yourself over to the idea and accepting it, right, and just working with it as it is, right? So you have to learn how to detach more fully.
For me, it's just the dynamic of getting out of the way. I mean, that was pretty much solved by the dynamic of going unconscious. But I mean, there's times that I want to participate at the same time that SOTU is here. So you know, I can do that, but I generally don't. I generally rely on the people that have been giving, that SOTU's been giving the information to tell me what they feel comfortable with. If they don't feel comfortable with it, telling me anything, that's fine. If they feel comfortable with bearing their soul to me, that's fine too. I can handle it. I don't think there's anything pretty much that I haven't heard at this point.
Yeah, but I've noticed that SOTU doesn't really like to get into the well, I don't want to make a generalization for other people, but my experience is SOTU they are not sweating the small stuff and very quickly will elevate the conversation, right? So that's an interesting thing about SOTU.
Because usually when someone is talking about something, you're giving the story that you have been telling yourself or you have been telling to others for the whole thing. And when they cut through, they are cutting right through to the source of the energy. In other words, why mess around with the frivolous stuff when you can get right down to the nitty gritty? And by dealing with that, you can change anything. Now, are they going to tell you what you want to hear? Probably not. Probably not. Because what good would that be? You know, it's like if you, and that's the thing that SOTU does. They give us an expanded version of ourselves. They get down to the basic, we create through our emotions. We create through our emotional situations. So if they can identify the dynamic for you and say, hey, this is why you are creating in the way because this is what you believe. And so when you understand that your reality is simply a reflection of what you believe, then you say, maybe I could expand my beliefs a little bit. So always like to say that all reality is created through the dynamics of your beliefs. So you might as well create the most flexible belief system for yourself as possible. Now, all of you out there may think that it's very complicated, but it's not. And in fact, you can apply this dynamic to anything. If you have integrity, if you do not lie, then you have permission to do anything. Well, except murder or things like that. But in fact, so many of you are getting wrapped up in the dynamics of an unspecified morality. Can I really say that and get away with it? It's like we have a 2,000-year-old idea of the divine, and some of us have a little bit of an older idea than that. But we have a 2,000-year-old idea of the divine, and I'm not talking to you. I'm watching the screen too. No, but we do. We have a 2,000-year-old idea of the divine. It's about time we upgraded ourselves to have a 21st century idea of the divine. And that means that we need to realize who we are, what humanity is in this whole integral dynamic of reality creation.
Okay, so I know that SOTU identifies as an oversoul, and I wanted to hear from you, Josh. What does that mean? What is an oversoul, and how does that fit in with the, I don't want to say hierarchy, but like the what people
that's the word
perceive of a hierarchy?
That's the word. The word is,
how does that work?
The word is hierarchy.
Uh-huh.
Okay, because you're absolutely right. Now, recently, things change with me week by week. That I can start out and I can say, oh yeah, I am trying to attract other channels because I want to work with other channels in such a way as, I'm fishing. I'm looking for others that we can work with in such a way as to be able to combine our energies and really create the dynamic of manifestation. Okay? Again, it takes a little work. You got to get on the same page and you have to, align your thoughts, your words, and your feelings. But once you do that, it's very easy. Now, I'm lost.
You were talking about an oversoul.
Oversoul. I got it. Oversoul. It's a misnomer. Okay? The oversoul dynamic is one that we utilize because there is a number of Seth books written back in the 70s before Jane passed that were called the Journey of Oversoul 7. All right, and it pretty much described the dynamic. But SOTU is really, if you really want to get into it, and really, I know this sounds ridiculous, but SOTU stands for Soul of the Universe.
Okay.
Okay?
That's
Bas-
important.
Basically, they describe it as they are the cosmic kick in the ass that we all need. That they are the energy of growth. And that dynamic of that energy of growth is something that we all possess. It's all something that we are innately born with. It is understanding that dynamic of that energy of growth within ourselves that allows us to understand what and who SOTU is. The
When you say growth, do you mean also creativity,
Mhm,
or
mhm. Yeah,
do you mean the creative dynamic? Yeah.
all of it,
Okay.
all of it. Anything that the
Right.
result of
Okay.
it afterwards, you wind up being more than you are in the moment. It's about becoming more.
Okay.
New levels of consciousness, new levels
Okay.
of wet mastery, new levels of knowing, right? And so, yeah, yeah. I'm looking over to Adrian. So if I'm looking at
Is she saying you're running out of time?
no, no, we have
Is she
plenty of
saying you're
time.
running
We
out of
can
time?
go all day if you want.
Okay.
No,
I
yeah,
think people listening might not be able to go on all day, but we want to make sure we get the important parts.
but
And I
this
mean,
will all be
the
recorded too.
understanding what you just said. Yeah, yeah. So understanding what you just said about SOTU, I think is really important. That was one of the things that I really felt I wanted to understand. I didn't understand the acronym, so that's interesting, and why it was capitalized. I never got that, so now I understand why it's an acronym. Um, how do you feel SOTU, like working with SOTU and working with this, is affects like your everyday life and sort of the rhythm of your life and sort of your energy levels and all of that? Like, what about the practical side of this? Like, you're a human, so how does this affect you in your humanness on the day to day?
Not much in that sort of
Okay.
sense. In other words, it doesn't really throw me off very much because I'm not doing those things that used to stress me out. Doing, like I said, I've done tens of thousands of private readings, and that used to stress me out. And it wasn't the part that I would do the private readings for people. It's that I would do the private readings one week, and then the person would be back next week with the same complaints and doing the same thing again next week, and then they'd be back the week after that. And in fact, what I realized were that people were utilizing SOTU as a crutch. SOTU kept giving them, answering their questions, telling them why things were that they were, and giving them techniques that they could utilize to change them. But they managed to not be able to maintain that dynamic until they got home, and they would come back the next week and not having done anything about it. And so for me, I've never, I don't like to say always or never, but I don't really do this for money. And so if I sense that you're not getting something positive out of the dynamic, I'm not going to create a codependent relationship with you because that's what winds up happening. People wind up with codependent relationships on SOTU because SOTU's giving them the dynamics of the miraculous answers on a weekly basis. And the problem is that if you're not willing to look at your own soul, if you're not willing to look at your own dynamic, and people are afraid, oh, it's going to be too painful. No, the painful part is not dealing with it. That's the painful part. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. You did. I mean, you answered it, but then you also answered another important one that I didn't have to ask. So that's really great. I mean, what people can kind of expect coming out, from a reading, or what that dynamic ends up being for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's also important to know. So Yeah, that's cool. And I could definitely see with SOTU's way of communicating how that can kind of cut through some of that stuff. And, so that's great. Well, I mean, I think it's fine to, I'm kind of coming to the end of my questions, but I know that you were sort of having an experience earlier today that you wanted to share some things that came out of that. So let's get into that so people can sort of get on with their Memorial Day weekend, I guess. Or look at this later.
You think they want to?
I think they do.
Yeah. Okay. So,
I think
I always, didn't I just say something about always and never? I try to tie things together because from SOTU's perspective, there is no time. And so often the metaphors and the analogies that existed in the old sacred texts and the stories that come down through those dynamics have real meaning. And I have been trying to put them into context with the 21st century. And so this morning, I'm musing and I'm sitting in front of the computer, and the thought, and people are talking about fallen angels. And not that I'm big on the angels. I realize that they are, this morning I realized what they really are, okay? And I realized what we really are. That in fact, why are the angels pissed at us, especially the archangels? Well, if you go back to the tales, the tale is because God loves us, and they didn't love the archangels as much because we have a direct connection, supposedly, we have a direct connection with the divine, and they don't. Well, I came to realize this morning that we are the cosmic wild card. That in fact, as a species, we have an ability to manifest where other species, not only from this dimension, but other dimensions within the physical universe, what I would classify as the physical universe, don't have that divine connection. And we as a species have that divine connection and are therefore able to manifest that energy directly through us. It's that whole dynamic where, the Bible, which I don't really believe much in, but the Bible says that you are created with the image of the divine. You are created in the image of God. Well, in fact, you're not created in that image, but you have all of the manifestation abilities of God, Goddess, all that is. And if you look at the dynamics of what's happening, and it's been a long journey of individuation that we've all been on. It's been a long journey of growth. It's been a long journey of maturity. I see us on the verge of our adulthood as a species, and with that dynamic, the ability to, did we lose it again? No.
No.
Okay, and with that comes the ability to create a world, any world that we wish. And as we each begin to do that, the possibilities are endless. They're exponential. I don't think any of us that are incarnate right now have any idea yet of the possibilities of what our reality could be. Now,
what do you think? Next lifetime? What do you think?
This
right
lifetime.
Now, huh?
This lifetime. If you've been listening to us this week, if you listened to us on last week's Facebook Live, we put out a situation, a what if. What if through this whole thing that the orange guy is doing, this whole big push on finding a vaccine, what if this hydroxychloroquine is in fact a miracle drug? What if, with the expanded testing, they find out that it's a cure for cancer? What if they find out that it's a cure for other things? What if it opens up the doorway to life extension that tags another 20 to 30 years on each of your realities? Now, there are those in your world that want to keep that from happening, because it means that they are not going to be able to control you any longer. So when you realize that that dynamic is available to you, and you realize that that's really what your future is, it's going to be kind of a sci-fi world where nobody's hungry, where nobody's really wanting for anything, where you do what you wish. Go ahead.
All because of the miracle drug? That's your like prediction?
No.
I don't
No,
think
we
you're
don't.
making a prediction, but like you're just saying, what if that was possible, right? You're not saying that
Right.
is what
Open it up.
Sure.
It's all exactly. It's all so much gloom and doom out there.
Clear.
Put a
I just
positive
want to be
spin
clear
on
because I
it.
don't want us. Sure. Yes. Well, the fact is, we just don't know, right? We're waiting to find out what's going to happen, and what we have available to us right now is our best thinking with the information we have, but also our instinct, our intuition. That's a big theme that I keep hearing
Look at the
about.
reflection.
It keeps coming up for me with people.
Look at the reflection.
What's that?
Look at the reflection of your reality. Okay, we're not telling you to watch TV, folks. We're really not. But it is through that dynamic that you begin to see the reflection of their reality. Fauci today, right? Isn't that his name? Fauci or
Fauci.
The came out late last night, and said that it could be irreparable damage to continue the quarantine. Yes, this came out last night, Friday. We're serious. So did we all create this by having a more positive outlook? I would say that we influenced it.
I mean, I think a lot of us are sick of staying at home, and we're wrestling with the morality of that, and the ethics around that. And so,
Right.
yeah, I could see how that might have influenced that kind of trickle down. Yeah, sure, for sure. Yeah, we are creating that.
Exactly. You don't have to you don't have to accept the gloom and doom that others are trying to dish out. You can, in fact, it just takes a little bit of a twist to turn it around to more positive outcomes. It's you either create your reality or you allow it. You can simply, what shall we say, derail a reality by discussing it and saying, no, I do not wish that to happen. No, I do not wish to have our population winnowed down. And yet, that's what's happening, and we would like you all to pay attention to that dynamic as much as anything. All right? It's very important.
That perspective. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Go ahead.
You go.
I was going to say that perspective shift is a little abstract for people right now, I think, because if they haven't been using that muscle, then it's a struggle to understand how to do it, right? But the fact is, like, we do have muscle memory, and like it does come back with use. It may not be perfect at first, but teaching people how to think for themselves, that you wouldn't think that that's what is needed, but in a very real sense it is. And I do sort of see the value of disruption in that process, right? So like you saying something that may not sit well with another person, but makes them irritable enough that they would go and check it out for themselves, or
try to get in an argument with me, which is deadly.
someone getting offended, somebody, right, or somebody getting offended by anything and then actually looking up what it is about and then deciding for themselves about it, right? So this is good stuff to be doing right now.
Oh, absolutely. And, if you're triggered, well, you better look at the trigger. If you're being triggered by something or someone or something, one of the things that SOTU back in the beginning when Trump was first elected and everybody was freaking out, SOTU would say, what is it about your father that you're so angry about? Because those of us that are a little older, that's our father. I'm 73. My father's passed, but that's my father. My father was a misogynist. My father was a sexist. They were all those things, but they were also very powerful in their own way and very successful within the dynamics of the reality that existed at that time. They knew how to play that part of the game. It will never work again in the future, but for that dynamic of that time period, it did work well. And so, you come forth with a dynamic of...
So this is the archetype that...
It's a what?
Right, this is the archetype that we're dealing with. This is the archetype that we're dealing with
Exactly.
Trump, and that's why it's so polarizing. It's like really polarizing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
because
the
you're triggered or you're right at home with it.
Yeah, and it's almost,
You're
it's
either triggered or you're really...
it's a gender thing also. It's the masculine versus the feminine in that sort of way, energetically. And so it winds... Yeah, I'm about to do third position. Adrian writes me notes. So yeah, you've got...
She's telling you not to go there?
Yeah. So we've got a position here. Well, if you're triggered, you've got to look at a situation that's triggering you. If you're looking at the dynamic that's triggering you, why is it triggering you so much? It's not Trump, unless you know him and he's done something personally with you. It's just a reflection of some other thing in your life that has hurt and or damaged you to cause you to be so enraged, because it's rage. Now, where does rage come from? Rage comes from suppressed angers. Anger is a normal dynamic, but most of you do not express your anger cleanly. And so what you wind up doing is stuff it down. But energy doesn't go anywhere unless you send it somewhere. And so what will happen is that dynamic of that anger will build up into a pool of rage. And so you will find yourself being triggered by something and overreacting because you're sitting on this pool of rage. Now, discover what the pool of rage is about, and you stop being triggered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's useful for anyone in any situation, not just in the political, in the political circumstances, right? That's good advice all the time, right?
I just use that as an example because it's the most severe right now. It's the most easily...
It's very visceral right
now. Yeah. It's the easiest to see. And the problem is that so many supposedly enlightened people are being triggered. They're... So,
Yeah, I think that's this thing I'm seeing people struggle with is that the anger, confusion, the rage, and the lashing out, and not even being absolutely certain why they're doing it. So knowing the why is super empowering and is sort of the beginning of resolving yourself to the point where you're not experiencing it in that, in that negative sense, in a way that takes something from you versus empowering you.
Well, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I'm really into psychology. I'm really into that kind of thing. So I do want to go back on the record, though, because I know, we should wrap up soon, but I want to go back on the record and say I'm going to challenge you on one point. So you were talking about the archangels. I don't necessarily think that they're pissed at us. Don't necessarily feel that the fallen angels are what we think they are. And that's really all I can say about that. I need to go on the record with that.
Can I just say I
Oh,
have
I might
Adrian's
be disagreeing
got-
with SOTU about that. I don't know. Maybe I am.
No. Adrian's got 2 cents that she wants to add. Come into the picture. Come into the picture. Come on.
Come into the picture, Anna. I want to hear it.
you got to move over some. Oh, there I am.
Adrian?
Hi, folks. No, my take on the archangels
Hi.
is very different than that of the other the other angelic realm. So I make a separation about them being angry.
As do I.
So,
As do I. As do I.
bye.
As do I. As do I. And I don't
Bye.
consider. And I don't consider. Again, I just didn't want to get into long detail.
Sure.
So.
But I hear so much nonsense about the archangels. I'm tired of it. So I just need to not you. I'm not saying you were saying nonsense, but I'm saying a lot of people get into a lot of nonsense about that.
I
And
know.
so I just wanted to go on record and say that part I don't necessarily agree with, but if people want to talk to me about the archangels, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, it's not that. So that wasn't the point of the whole thing. The point of the whole thing was that the metaphors that exist for a reason. And the whole dynamic is, if I can present a dynamic where people can understand, can relate to it emotionally themselves, that if, let's say you are, put yourself in that position. You're a servant of the divine, you're and all of a sudden the divine creates this species that has what you've been looking for the whole time. And God just granted it to come on, that's called jealousy. Jealousy, envy, and rage. Those 3 things go together. So, but that would be a very strictly a human reaction to it. And so if people can understand what the human reaction would be, you can understand the metaphor of the whole thing. So that's a long explanation of saying.
So it's the power of the myth and the archetype. Yeah. Okay. So great. I get it now what you were illustrating there because that's what people commonly think. So that's interesting. But so cool. So we're gonna let people know there's gonna be a part 2 to this interview process, and in that interview we're gonna actually talk to SOTU.
Correct.
And ask SOTU some questions. But I have a feeling SOTU is going to do most of the talking, I think, and so we'll see how that goes. But maybe we can work it out so that if people have questions, they can let us know either ahead of time or during the live, and we can maybe track that. And so, but that's gonna be really fun. I'm excited for that.
Me too. It's and you did great, by the way. Great interview. It's important. There's we could go for another hour, easy. I haven't told you about being in the war or anything like that. So it's like we all have multi-level pasts. So and it being Memorial Day and all of that stuff. But that's that's a point that I wanted to make, and I'd like to make on leaving. With this thing, and I'd like everybody to realize that they are focusing on and I don't really want to get into the they and who they are, but the powers that be are trying to winnow down the population, and they're doing it with the oldest and the frailest of us, but they're also doing it with the I had to go to an appointment at the VA hospital in Albany. Was that yesterday? A couple of days ago, and it's shocking because the VA hospital is a center for a lot of people, a lot of men that are really hurting, emotionally, spiritually, physically, a lot of wounded people. in very many ways. And the VA, you wouldn't realize it, but usually you go into the lobby of the VA hospital and there's dozens, if not 100 guys sitting around because it's a place that they can all get together and they can all interact. Well, that's not allowed anymore. And not only is that not allowed anymore, it's not going to be allowed. I was in the emergency room sitting next to a guy that had been drinking a quart of bourbon a day for the last month and a half. That because of the shutdown and because of all of that, there's no services available to people anymore. So the dynamic has to, not has to, but the dynamic is that we need to have awareness of what's being done in our name. So I just want to leave that.
It's important.
Go ahead.
I said that's really important to remember. And also, thank you for your service. I didn't realize that you had been
For
were
sure.
you in the Army, Navy. What did you say?
I didn't. And the reason that I didn't is I'm one of those vets that came home and got spit on. And so I really, back in those days, really gave the finger to all of you folks. And I dropped out. And I dropped out for about 25 years. And I had a great time. But I dropped out because the levels of betrayal, you could not realize the levels of betrayal to do what we had to do in that situation. This was 1966, 1967. To have to be put in. The Iraq guys can tell you that. The Afghanistan guys can tell you that. All the people that are involved in the dynamics, you do what you're told to do and all of that stuff, and you hope to have the support of people when you get home. We didn't have support of anybody. It wasn't until 1982 that somebody said, "Thank you for your service." I got out in 1969. Okay, so if you want to feel alienated from your government, go into service.
It's really too bad. I'm sorry to hear that.
Hey, it helped shape my reality. I wouldn't be.
Well, yeah,
I wouldn't be who I am
that's how
now.
it works.
I wouldn't be who I am now if that hadn't happened. So I look at it now. I can look at it and say, even though it was a very traumatic experience, it turned out to be for the better. So you can take any experience that you have and learn from it. Because I'd never do that again.
Sure. Right. Experiencing that adversity and how you use that, how you turn it and pivot it is super important. And again, that's really related to what you were saying about the small shifts in perspective and perception that allow you to kind of open up to a more positive view of what's happening and looking for that out there and making decisions based on that versus focusing on the negative and what you do not have and what you do not have control over.
Right. But it also keeps you.
I mean, we have more control. We have more control than we think.
It's a dynamic of limited imagination, and we've been taught that somehow utilizing our imagination is negative, but it's not. It's incredibly positive. And so when you realize that, but again, it's what you've been taught. It's what we've been taught in our schools. It's what we've been taught through the dynamics of politics, the quote unquote nanny state and all of that. There's just like, we're not taught to be personally responsible anymore. At least it seems like that's what seems to be happening in our world. And so now reality is coming around and is forcing us to all be more responsible. Isn't reality elegant?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's I think, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and I think that's a good, right. That's a good ending message, I think, is the taking responsibility piece.
Yeah.
For your own personal perception. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
very good. Very good.
All right. Thank you. Adrian says, wrap it up. Okay, so we've probably been going for a couple hours.
So it's
2:27, yeah.
an hour and a half.
Hour and a
yeah.
half.
But well, I guess we can expect that probably from SOTU as well. So we should let people know that.
Yeah, they
and
can
when
even go
this-
longer.
When this gets onto YouTube, yeah. When this gets onto YouTube, though, people can watch it at their own leisure. But yeah, I mean, this has been really great. I really appreciate your help, and I appreciate Adrienne so much for figuring it out and letting me off the hook with that. That was amazing for me. And yeah, I love it. It's great.
So
We'll have another conversation about background stuff too, because I also want to hear more about how you and Adrienne work together, and like that's an interesting dynamic to me too. But we can talk about that in another conversation too.
yeah, oh, you
But,
know,
all right,
that's
so
a good half hour right there.
Yeah. Well, and I want her to get on camera for that too. But we'll let people know when the next one is scheduled for. We were thinking maybe a week out, but let's see. I mean, things are changing so fast, so
Well,
we'll update really soon.
And maybe people can decide if they might want to do an evening. You know, evenings are good, but the thing is that if we started, we should, if we're going to do an evening, we should probably start about 6 or 6:30 because it could go 9, 10 o'clock without any problem.
Well, we'll hash it out. We'll hash it out.
Well, what we'll do is, you know, if people want to send in a comment, people want to put a vote in on it, you know, we'll make it work. We'll make it work. Hey, and maybe we can have a session at maybe we can have a session at Splendor, because SOTU is you think SOTU is good over the internet, face to face. We're not going to get so. We will edit these. We're not going to edit anything out, but I think that it's recorded in like 3 sections at this point. So what we'll try to do is we'll stitch them together. We'll get it up on our Facebook page. We'll get it up on our YouTube page, and we'll send it to you for you to get it up in your pages. Okay, I hope.
That sounds great.
Are we good? Do you want me to close, or would you like to close?
Yeah, let's close.
Okay, everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope that you found it interesting. Tomorrow, we have our radio show on Blog Talk Radio, Healing the Rift, from 11 to 12:30. And you can check us out there. If you have any questions, it's usually a much better connection, and because it's strictly sound and it's not video. So we should have a much smoother presentation as far as that goes tomorrow. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask SOTU directly, any questions at all, feel free to call. That's Blog Talk Radio /Healing the Rift. So I want to thank Amy for her willingness to go here. It was a great interview. You did a great job. I want to thank Adrienne.
Thank you.
I want to thank Adrienne for putting this all together.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Thanks.
We love you all. We'll see you next time.